All right, so we take a look at the rest of the college football games on the card here that we didn't get to over the course of the week. There are a lot of them because, again, as I said, we've been doing a little bit more college basketball here this week, trying to work in a few more of the different markets. So a lot of college football stuff. Going to try to run through these as quickly as I possibly can to get as many of them out there to you as possible here for this weekend in college football. We talked about the two Thursday games there with Brad. We talked about UCF and Tulsa. We talked earlier in the week about Washington and Oregon State. I like Oregon State a little bit in that game. Seeing some 10.5s pop out there now. A game I haven't played yet because I thought 10.5 could potentially be coming here with people still buying into Washington, still not buying into what Oregon State is doing here this year. Again, we've got Washington team that's lost 4 games. They're not going to an esteemed bowl this year after going to the Rose, Peach, and Fiesta the last 3 years. They're not going to any of those here this year. So, like Oregon State, a fairly live team in that one in a game that should have a lot of points, should have quite a bit of back and forth to it. So I'm looking at Oregon State here on Friday night. Looking over at Saturday, and again, trying to run through as many of these games as possible here. You've got Notre Dame and Duke. Notre Dame up to an 8-point favorite here, total down a couple of points from 53 to 51. In this game here, my line, Notre Dame minus 7.5. So I'm right there in line with the market. Of course, it's not a surprise that this game came out a little bit low after the debacle last week for Notre Dame against Virginia Tech. Of course, they did come away with the win. But as Brad said in that previous segment, that 96, 98-yard strip 6 right before halftime completely changed the complexion of the game. Notre Dame had some very untimely turnovers in that one. I don't think this is a ruined team. I think coming off that blowout loss to Michigan was a bad spot for them. But here against Duke, a Duke team that started very well in the non-conference, has kind of faded a little bit since that big resounding win over Virginia Tech. Notre Dame may be the side here, and I don't love it. I certainly don't love laying more than a touchdown with a total that's coming down, but I don't think I can take Duke here. Quentin Harris makes a lot of plays, but we've seen some of the turnover problems that he's had. One of the reasons why Daniel Jones was able to step in and really take charge of that position while he was in Durham. I think Notre Dame is the side here, but again, laying over a touchdown with a total coming down, not really a spot I'm too eager to take a look at. Ohio State, 42.5 to 43.5 point favorite, total of 65 against Maryland. Maryland has not been good over the last few weeks here. They've been blown out by teams that are not on Ohio State's level. But again, a very big number here for the Buckeyes. Yeah, it's nice that they're coming off of a bye. They've got Rutgers, so they've got essentially another bye week here the following week. Then they get that Penn State game on the 23rd. I don't think you can really touch Ohio State in these next 2 games. They're going to be a massive 50-plus point favorite against Rutgers. They're laying over 40 here against Maryland. Just not a game I have too much interest in with the Buckeyes and the Terrapins. Again, if you're in a spread pool, an ATS pool, something like that, it would only be Ohio State for me just because I don't see Maryland doing a whole lot offensively. So the Buckeyes could very well cover this game 49-0, 52-7, something like that. So I think I'd have to look Ohio State, but not a game on my radar at all. Army and UMass. Army laying 35. And we talked about this game a little bit on Monday. Army's laid 30-plus points 9 other times. It's the first time against an FBS team. Obviously, UMass, a very fringy FBS team, the lowest power-rated team I've ever had in my 5-6 years of doing power ratings. So I don't know if they stop Army here, but again, a limited number of possessions for Army to get margin. They're not as efficient as they've been in the last 2 years. So I don't think I can take either side here in this game. Not a whole lot to like about side or total in that one. Game 133, 134, UConn and Cincinnati. Cincinnati, 35-point favorite, total down from 57 to 54.5 here. We've actually seen the total come down in quite a few Cincinnati games here this year. The betting market liking that Cincinnati defense, maybe a little concerned about Desmond Ridder and the offense. Last week, Cincinnati got badly outgained, badly out first down by East Carolina. Can UConn move the football with any measure of success? I wouldn't think so. I would think Cincinnati buttons up a lot of those defensive issues. But after seeing Cincinnati struggle so much with East Carolina in a big favorite role on the road last week, I'd find it very, very hard to lay 35 points here against UConn. So another stay away game for me, but just kind of giving you some thoughts and some short breakdowns here on as many of the games as I can with the time left during today's show. Illinois and Michigan State. Michigan State up to a 14.5-point favorite, up from 11.5. Total only up a point to 45. When you see a line move here of this magnitude of 3 or 4 points going through some double-digit numbers here, and the total doesn't move, you have a pretty good idea of what to expect here. The expectation is that Michigan State's defense will shut down Illinois' offense. Now, do you think Michigan State can get into the upper 20s, maybe low 30s, where they need to cover this number? That's a big question mark. Michigan State has not had success offensively against virtually anybody here so far this season. So I'd have serious concerns about Sparty's chances of covering the number here in this game. If I look at my line for this one, I've got it Michigan State minus 14. So I agree with the initial line move, but now that we've gone up to 14.5 and even a 15.5 popping out there, I don't see how you can take Michigan State. Again, this offense just does not give you any indication that they can create margin. Maybe the defense can get a couple of scores, something like that. I think you'd be more inclined to look at the under here because, again, the expectation within the line is that Michigan State will shut down Illinois' offense. Total up only to 45. Line goes up 3 or 4 points. That would imply that Illinois doesn't move the football much in this game. If that's the case, you probably want to look at the under here because Michigan State hasn't moved the football much in really any of its games here so far this season. Game 145, 146, Purdue and Northwestern. This one's pretty interesting. Purdue was a 2-point road favorite. Jack Plummer out for the year. Purdue now on their third-string quarterback. Northwestern now a 2.5-point favorite. Total in this game down from 41.5 to as low as 38.5 out there in the marketplace. And I think Purdue is the side here. I understand that they go from Jack Plummer to Aiden O'Connell, and obviously Aiden O'Connell, in the mind of Jeff Brom, not good enough to play over Jack Plummer. But Northwestern's offense is abominable. I mean, they are terrible. My line is Northwestern -1 here. If I can get a rogue 3, I don't know if it happens. I would look the Purdue route here in this game. But both of these teams expected to struggle offensively. Total certainly implies that. The move down on the total certainly implies that. You really don't want to play teasers in college football. And I just want to throw this out there. It's such a high variance environment in college football that teasers aren't nearly as effective in college as they are in the NFL. Because a lot of people will be tempted to use this as a leg of a Wong teaser. Take Purdue up to 8 or 8.5 with that low total of 39. You understand the thought process there, and I can certainly understand the rationale behind it. But again, college football, just a much higher variance type of environment. So even though it looks sexy for a teaser, it looks sexy for Purdue up to 8 or 8.5, something like that, not something that I would advise. For one thing, it's going to be hard for you to find another game that fits the bill of a Wong teaser where you've got a low total and a spread you can take through 3 and 7. You're not going to find a lot of those opportunities in college football. TCU kind of won with a lower total of 48, at least lower by college football standards, but still not a great game to pair with something like Purdue. So again, there will be this push to maybe tease a game like that, but I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't advise it. If it's good enough to take, just go ahead and play it as opposed to worrying about some sort of teaser angle. Game 149, 150 here, Stanford and Colorado. Stanford laying 3.5 on the road in Boulder. My line on this game is Stanford -5. You've got the total going up a little bit, 54.5 to 56. Stanford is a better offensive team with KJ Costello in the equation. Their defense has not played particularly well this year. They've not run the football all that well. I just don't think Colorado is a very good team. Early in the year, Colorado with some very misleading results and outcomes, games where they were outgained and picked up a win, the comeback game against Nebraska, stuff like that, losing to Air Force. They really had no business even taking the Air Force to overtime in that game. I'm just not a believer in Colorado, but I certainly can understand not wanting to lay a field goal or more with Stanford on the road. So my line is 5. If I had to do anything here, I would lean to the Stanford side, but not a game that I'm overly interested in here. Although keep in mind, over the rest of the season here, even if a game is kind of on the fringes for you, you still have these bowl game considerations where teams want to get to 6 wins. For Colorado, they have to win out. They're probably not going to do it. For Stanford, they're 4-4, so they still have some opportunities to get to a bowl game. Colorado at 3-6 has this week's game against Stanford. Then they play Washington and then on the road at Utah. They're not winning 6 games here. They're not going to run this table. Stanford at least has a legitimate shot at a bowl game, playing at Washington State, Cal at home, Notre Dame at home. Stanford has a legitimate shot at going to a bowl. Is it the bowl game that they expect to go to given where the program has been? No. But for Colorado here, 5 losses in Pac-12 play already, 6 losses on the season overall. You've got to think that this is a situation where Stanford comes in a little bit more motivated. They would be the side I would have to take a look at here. Game 155, 156, Wyoming and Boise State. Maybe you kind of picked up on this in the previous segment where Brad and I were talking, but I would have to look Boise State here. I played Boise State at 12. Boise State now a 13.5-point favorite. Wyoming has run the football very, very effectively this season, but Wyoming losing Sean Chambers, their second leading rusher. Tyler Vanderwall is not the level of rusher that Chambers is. With Chambers, you can run an option look. You can run a pistol if you want. You can, do some different things in terms of scrambling in the pass game. Excuse me. Vanderwall doesn't have that. So it's a big element missing from this Wyoming rushing attack. Boise State, usually a very good rush defense. I think Boise State is very much the side here. Get this one before it goes to 14. Again, the expectation for a lower scoring game here with a total of 48. But still, I don't see Wyoming having much success offensively at all whatsoever. Not sure about Bachmeier for Boise State, but to me, I don't even think it matters because I don't see Wyoming moving the football all that effectively here in this game. Like I said, I played Boise at 12, at 13.5. Boise still very much worth a play. Game 157, 158 here, Liberty and BYU. BYU a 17-point favorite, total of 58.5. This is an interesting handicap. You've got BYU off of the resounding blowout win over Utah State in one of their 2 in-state rivalry games. Liberty, did a number on UMass, but now they're going out on the road in a difficult spot playing in Provo. In the altitude, at least weather doesn't appear to be a factor in this game for Liberty. But for BYU here, as a 17-point favorite, coming off of an emotional win, I think it's a difficult spot for them. Total up to 58.5, 59. That would be the only way that I would look here because I think BYU moves the football. I think Liberty can as well, but not a game that I've got too strong of an opinion on one way or another. South Alabama and Texas State here. Texas State, 7.5-point favorite. A lot of sharp people have liked Texas State a lot here over the course of the season. Offensively, they were better with Gresh Jensen as opposed to Tyler Vitt. Tyler Vitt just doesn't have the same upside throwing the football that Jensen had. They're trying to incorporate some more of a West Coast spread, a little more tempo with offensive coordinator Bob Stitt. You certainly have to like that. And I think long-term, that can have some success here in the Sun Belt Conference. But laying 7.5 here to a South Alabama team that's not very good, very poor offensively. This is a total that's in the 41.5 range. South Alabama just finds ways to hang around. And I think it's very risky to lay a big price here with a Texas State team, really in any context. My line on this game, actually Texas State minus 7.5. So I'm right there in line with the market. But when you've got these teams that haven't had expectations and all of a sudden they do, I think it's a very tough sell to back a team like that. So no play for me on that game. If I had to do anything, I would look the South Alabama way, but not a game I'm overly interested in. Game 175, 176 is very interesting here. UAB and Southern Miss. And this line has been coming down. Southern Miss, a 7-point favorite at the open, now in the 4.5 or 5 range. UAB, look, defensively, they're legit. They were very good defensively against Tennessee last week. The offense was a disaster. And UAB, as we talked about a lot leading into that game last week, had played the 189th ranked schedule in college football. Well, now they play an SMU team or a Southern Miss team that's more on their level, but Tyler Johnson, the quarterback, is banged up. UAB, maybe getting exposed a little bit last week. Southern Miss with some extra prep time with quarterback Jack Abraham. My line on this game actually has Southern Miss minus 5.5. So This line has come down towards my number, now moved through my number. I think Southern Miss is the side here, though. And I really respect Bill Clark. I really respect that UAB defense. But if I had to do anything here, I would look the Southern Miss route. And if this game keeps coming down to say something like 3.5, I may end up with a Southern Miss ticket in this one. Game 183, 184, Kansas State and Texas. Texas, a 7-point favorite here, total in the 58 range against Kansas State. And I understand where this movement is coming from. Texas up from 6 to 7. You would certainly expect Texas to be a little bit better. Kansas State, a team that not a whole lot of people liked a lot coming into the season because we weren't sure what we were going to get in year one of Chris Kleiman. Kansas State, huge win over Oklahoma where they hung on. You thought maybe there could be a potential letdown against Kansas. That didn't happen in the rivalry game. This could be the spot. Kansas State is not that talented of a team. They're very well coached. They've done well on the JUCO, train over the last few years. Skylar Thompson's played very well here over the last couple of weeks. This could be a balloon popping spot for Kansas State. I agree with the line move here on Texas. Even though my power ratings have this game Texas minus 4.5, that's just a raw power rating based on where I have the two teams plus home field advantage. I think situationally, this is a very bad spot for Kansas State. Now, again, Texas is a team that has fallen short many times with expectations. Tom Herman much better in a dog role. When they were favored under Charlie Strong, they didn't perform well. There is that concern here. But I think Texas is the side. I think this is a spot for Kansas State where it's very, very difficult for them to sustain a high level of play. I think Texas minus 7 here is the side. Georgia State, UL Monroe. Georgia State, 2.5-point road favorite here. Total in the mid-70s for this one. I was on Monroe last week. I was very disappointed with them. Got off to a very hot start, but then really struggled against Arkansas State. I think the only way to go here is Georgia State. This line looks a little bit trappy, I think, in the sense that Georgia State has a very good resume. Louisiana Monroe does not. The line does look a little bit short here. My line is Georgia State minus 3. But again, you've got a couple of teams here that don't get consistent stops on defense. I just think Georgia State's offense is much more efficient than Louisiana Monroe. So Georgia State minus 2, minus 2.5 would be the way that I would look in that one. Game 195, 196, Wazoo and Cal. Washington State, 7.5-point favorite, making the trip down to Berkeley. Total here of 51.5 or 52. And this is interesting because this is a Cal team that has had some very, very low totals over the course of the season here. In fact, this is trending to be the highest total in a Cal game this season. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, it was a total of 37 against Utah. Oregon State scores a lot of points. That was a 51.5-point total. Oregon was 46.5, 43 for Arizona State. The total here implies to me that Cal's offense may be able to have a little bit of success here. This is one of my biggest overlays of the week. My line is actually Washington State minus 2 in this one. I like Cal. We'll see if Chase Garbers is able to play for them, but I think Cal's defense is very good. You had an extra week to try and figure things out with that Washington State air raid. I think this is a spot where Cal is a decent look here in this one. I like them plus the 7.5, getting more than that key number. Again, the total implies that Cal could have some offensive success here. And when that's the implication, when they've had none all season long, that really stands out to me in a big way. Speaking of standing out, San Diego State, a 17.5-point favorite against Nevada with a total of 39. My line is 17 here, but low total. Nevada would have to be held to almost single digits or very low teens here for San Diego State to cover this number. I don't know if that happens, but very interesting to see the 17.5 number with a total of 39 there. Finally, 199, 200, San Jose State and Hawaii. Hawaii, 7.5, 8-point favorite here over San Jose State. Very lofty total of 76.5 for the degenerate special out on the island. My line here is only Hawaii minus 5.5, but this is a bad spot for San Jose State. A few weeks ago, they played at Army, came away with that win on the East Coast. Boise State last week, a game that they put a lot into. Now the 5-hour flight out to the island to Hawaii, couple-hour time difference. It's a bad spot for San Jose State. This line probably is a little bit high, but Hawaii, and this is something we may want to look at here, Hawaii coming back off games on the mainland has really struggled. When you look at Hawaii, In last week's game against Fresno State, they lose by 10. Fresno State, not a very good team here so far this season, but they played at New Mexico the week before, came back home and struggled. They got blown out by Air Force after a couple games on the mainland against Nevada and Boise State. This is back-to-back home games for Hawaii. They've been much better in that situation over the last several years. So even though this line looks high, even though everyone wants to back the Cinderella-type team in San Jose State, Hawaii probably is the right side here, but we should see a lot of points in that game, which will definitely help those over chasers in that late week 11 matchup. So ran through a lot of games here in my solo segment and also my segment there with Brad Powers. A lot of good stuff, hopefully, on today's show.